Over the course of the 20th century, something very strange happened to music. Classical and popular music turned from partners into enemies. As popular music began to win the battle for audiences, contemporary classical music moved further and further away from popular taste. Ordinary listeners found themselves increasingly bewildered by the harshness of so much new music. But even while this confusion raged, while classical and popular tussled for superiority, one man brilliantly walked the tightrope between the two, long before crossover became a buzzword. In this one supremely talented man, all the great currents of 20th century music were to collide and ferment in a rich stylistic melting pot. He was a composer, a conductor, a TV personality, a concert pianist, an educator and visionary. He was Leonard Bernstein. Leonard Bernstein wrote some of the best-known popular music of the 20th century, from On the Town, with its famous cinematic hymn of praise to the Big Apple, to a cultural landmark, West Side Story. Made into an Oscar-winning film, Bernstein's masterpiece showcases some of the greatest dance sequences in screen history, the prototypes for 1,000 music videos. West Side Story was a new kind of musical with a contemporary, hard-edged and popular sound. Bernstein's extraordinary achievement in West Side Story was to write the music for some truly magnificent songs, but to do so in a richly layered and ambitious musical, which tackled gritty and difficult issues, not least of them poverty, racism and immigration. But he didn't just expand the available subject matter for the musical. The music he composed over a 40-year career integrates classical with jazz and rock, sacred music from the Christian and the Jewish traditions, and European and South American rhythms. He was the musical gatekeeper of America's 20th century. Bernstein also pointed the way forward for the journey we're still on today, the journey into musical fusion. Leonard Bernstein was born into a Russian Jewish family in Massachusetts in 1918. From an early age, he showed an extraordinary level of natural musical talent. He was an outstanding young pianist and conductor. By 1943, aged 25, he was working as a trainee conductor for the New York Philharmonic. For the ferociously ambitious Bernstein, the limelight seemed a long way away. But then a guest conductor, the Austrian maestro Bruno Walter, fell ill, and Bernstein, despite being a total unknown, took over without rehearsal at the last minute. The performance, broadcast on national radio from Carnegie Hall, was a triumph. A star was born. Bernstein instantly became a household name. He did so because at last a native-born American had joined the ranks of the conducting elite. Up until then, concertgoers had got used to the fact that the leading conductors in America were elderly European émigrés. Now they had their own homegrown American Lenny Bernstein. For the rest of his life, Bernstein was one of the world's most in-demand conductors. It's hardly surprising, therefore, that with his globe-trotting conducting engagements, he didn't find time to be a prolific composer. In his long career, much to his regret, he wrote only 3 symphonies. The first of these, Jeremiah, was written in 1942 when Bernstein was 24. Impressive though it is for a first stab, it is a first stab, and owes much to the symphonic European masters Mahler, Shostakovich and Sibelius. Bernstein identified strongly with these composers, especially Gustav Mahler, whose works he'd done so much to popularise. Like Mahler, Bernstein was a Jew in a predominantly Christian world. But unlike so many Jewish composers before him, Bernstein wasn't hiding his background. Indeed, he was making it an explicit part of his symphony. Jeremiah is an impassioned cry of despair for the Jewish people. In the third movement, a soprano soloist sings texts in Hebrew from the Book of Lamentations. In Jeremiah, Bernstein served notice that stylistic fusion was to be his calling card. It was the first of many such challenges that Bernstein made to the classical status quo, challenges that undoubtedly changed the face and character of 20th century music. Leonard Bernstein's musical taste was wide-ranging and open-minded. His compositions reflected this. In his second symphony, The Age of Anxiety, Bernstein rams together the neatness of classical form with a raw jazz jumpiness. He wrote into it a fiendishly virtuoso piano solo, Fats Waller meets Stravinsky, a part he often played himself.
That's right.
Not always to his own satisfaction.
Very difficult. I can't. It's terribly difficult, and some of our best pianists can't play it. So why should I?
In this piece, Bernstein shows off his musical versatility big time. One moment it sounds like Prokofiev, the next Gershwin, then it's Rachmaninoff, followed by Duke Ellington. This promiscuous eclecticism led many classical critics to wonder whether he had a truly distinctive voice of his own. They charged him with a kind of restless musical kleptomania. But this fundamentally misunderstands what was going on in music mid-century. They were out of step with the times, not Bernstein. The fact is, his playful pilfering of available musical styles was the shape of things to come. The engine that powered 20th century music was cross-fertilization of styles, and Bernstein knew better than anyone how to harness that energy. For such a restlessly creative figure, writing only symphonies was never going to be enough. He'd already found another playground for his boundless talents, Broadway. The main catalyst for Bernstein's entry into popular music was a gifted young dancer and choreographer, Jerome Robbins. One night in 1943, he turned up on Bernstein's doorstep and suggested they collaborate on a new type of modern ballet. The result was Fancy Free. The concept of Fancy Free was simple and refreshing. It aimed to reflect in a modern ballet context the racy sidewalk buzz of wartime Manhattan as encountered by three sailors on shore leave. The music for Fancy Free was refreshing too. It integrated the hip popular dances of the moment. It was new and it was exciting. Plans were soon made to expand it into a full-scale Broadway show. This was to become Bernstein's first hit musical, On the Town. With music by Bernstein, choreography by Jerome Robbins, book and lyrics by Betty Comden and Adolph Green, On the Town was fancy-free Mark II, now with great songs. It was a solid gold hit running on Broadway for over a year.
New York, New York, it's a hell of a town. We've got one day here and not another minute to see the famous sights.
We'll find the romance and danger waiting in it beneath the Broadway light.
But we hair on our chests to what we like the rest of the nights.
Sight, sight, sight!
New York, New York.
Naturally, Bernstein was now in considerable demand as a Broadway show composer. But the commercial success of On the Town led his more senior classical colleagues to worry that he was becoming sidetracked by frippery and fun. Bernstein himself was ambivalent about his Broadway success. In the 1940s, classical and popular music seemed worlds apart, like two siblings who lived in the same house who despised and cold-shouldered each other. This yawning gulf between two musical worlds was one of the main reasons why Bernstein's career as a composer was beset by difficulties. Torn between the two warring worlds, Bernstein plunged back into classical music, cementing his reputation as one of the world's leading conductors. In 1953, he reached a pinnacle. He conducted La Divina, Maria Callas, at La Scala Milan, opera's holiest of holies. This set him thinking. Could he do for 20th century Americans what Verdi had done for 19th century Italians? Give them their own modern equivalent of popular grand music theatre. At first, it seemed the answer was to resuscitate opera itself, but with a modern twist. In December 1953, he began work on a piece that was, in effect, a pastiche comic opera, an adaptation of Voltaire's 1758 satire, Candide. Candide was intended as a biting political satire on 50s America. Voltaire's scathing attack on the Catholic Inquisition, for example, became a metaphor for the anti-communist witch hunts led by Senator McCarthy and his House Un-American Activities Committee. The show's librettist, Lillian Hellman, had herself defied McCarthy's committee and been blacklisted. Candide was her revenge.
Review lesson 11, paragraph 2, axiom 7. Once one dismisses the rest of all possible worlds, one finds that this is the best of all possible worlds. Once one dismisses the rest of all possible worlds, one finds that this is the best of all possible worlds.
Candide was a wonderfully witty, colourful piece of work, but it wasn't well received, and it certainly wasn't the answer to Bernstein's quest. His new American music theatre wasn't going to emerge from a parodic operatic romp based on a book by a dead Frenchman. The fact is, he was looking down the wrong end of the telescope. He was trying in Candide to bring the bawdy fun of the stage musical into opera. In his next stage work, he did the exact opposite, bringing the techniques of opera to bear and the popular musical, and, at last, he found what he was looking for. The solution was West Side Story. It had great songs, lyrics, dance, storylines, and vitality. But it was much more than a slick and stylish night out. It had a musical ambition and scale that was almost unthinkable before it. There aren't many experts in the field who disagree with the notion that West Side Story is the finest musical of all time. I'd go further still. Widening the field out to include all forms of musical theatre, West Side is a serious contender for the 20th century's single most important work for the musical stage. In West Side Story, Bernstein found the key to his own personal musical dilemma. In doing so, he also pointed the way forward for generations of theatre composers, myself included. Nearly half a century later, West Side Story is still the standard to aim for. West Side Story began life as far back as 1949, when Jerome Robbins, Bernstein, and dramatist Arthur Lawrence discussed the possibility of a modernized Romeo and Juliet set in Manhattan's East Side slums, pitting rival Catholic and Jewish gangs against each other during the Passover Easter festival. It was originally to be called East Side Story. The team pursued this version for another 6 years, until 1955, when a newspaper story in Los Angeles about gang warfare in a downtown Mexican neighborhood prompted a change of direction. They took what was still East Side Story and refocused it on newly arrived immigrant groups in New York, in particular Puerto Ricans. Realizing that the East Side slums had been demolished since they thought up the idea, they changed the title to West Side Story. But they still didn't have a lyricist until Bernstein was introduced to the 22-year-old Stephen Sondheim, who gradually took over the song lyrics. West Side Story opened on Broadway in 1957 and it was a gigantic hit. It played all over the world, and in 1961 it reached an even bigger audience when it was turned into a film.
Skyscrapers bloom in America, Cadillacs zoom in America, industry boom in America,
Wealth in a room in America.
West Side Story tackled one of the thorniest subjects of post-war America, race. Not many straight movies had done this by 1961, let alone a film musical.
life can be bright in America,
If you can fight in America,
life is all right in America.
if you're all white in America.
Here was something quite radical for a musical, whether on stage or on film. An urban, contemporary landscape in a show that portrayed, in song, drama and dance, the real street culture of its time. But not only did West Side Story have a grittier subject than previous musicals, it was structurally more ambitious too, and the complexity, the daring and panache of its musical shape came from opera. So what was it that opera offered the Broadway musical that proved so essential to its future development? Let's look at the difference between the two genres. Let's make up a scene and set it first as an opera and then as a musical. Supposing a man, Dennis, goes into a pub and confronts his ex-lover, Angelina. Once it's set to music, of course, it all becomes rather silly, but listen out for the difference between the two. In the opera version, the music's job is to tell the story at all times. So the second he walks in, the underscore tells us that something is afoot.
The usual police love.
Bitter,
Bitter.
bitter,
Bitter.
Having established a disconcerting mood, Dennis tells us, through singing, two pieces of information. First, that he's given up smoking, and second, that he can't shake off his feelings for Angelina.
I've given up smoking, Angelina.
about time too.
I've given up smoking, but I can't give up you. Bitter, bitter.
In the opera version, passions spiral quickly out of control. Angelina joins in with her own musical line. The melody shifts and changes, repetition in the tune is fairly rare, and the two musical voices seem to be competing for the listener's attention. It's a full-on musical argument.
Ever since we parted, the gods have treated me cruelly. The stormy winds of dark and angry jealousy have swept my aching brow. At night I toss and turn and dream of Angelina. My regret, my remorse, my bitter, bitter, empty heart.
You can waltz in here and ruin
since
my
we
life again.
parted, the
It's
gods have
been months
treated me
and months since I found you in
cruelly.
bed
The
with
stormy
that
winds of dark
slapper from
and angry
Tesco.
jealousy have swept my aching
But
brow. At night I
love,
toss and
bloody
turn and dream of
dead.
Angelina. My
And she's a
regret, my
tot,
remorse,
she's a
my
tot.
bitter,
Bitter cat, bitter silly
empty
cat.
heart.
But look at what might happen in the musical version. The build-up over the opening rhythmic pattern is mainly spoken. When the characters can bear it no more and emotion bursts out, the whole pub seems to be swept into it. The tune is instantly catchy, and even the musical conflict between Angelina and Dennis appears to interlock more easily. With a more predictable meter and rhymes, the lyric makes it easier for us to anticipate what's happening. We are being driven relentlessly into a distinct number that could be lifted from the show and work on its own.
Like the usual, please, love.
What are you doing in here? Didn't I bar you?
You can't stop me coming in here.
Wanna bet? Thought you'd given them up then.
I tried, but I couldn't, Ange. I couldn't give you up neither.
Don't take the mickey.
Scout's honour. I love you, Angelina. I bloody love you and all. I can't give you up, Angelina. I can't kick the habit. I'm stuck in a hole, Angelina. I'm caught like a rabbit. You make me yearn for your sweet return, for the smile, for the style, for the guile of you. My whole heart bleeds for my spiritual needs, for the lips and the zips and the hips of you. I can't give you up, Angelina. A sad messed up geezer. You'll fit but you're on, Angelina. A real cockney teaser. It makes me hot what I still ain't got. On the train, in the rain, I'm insane for you. I see your touch and my head goes whoosh. What I miss is the bliss of a kiss from you.
You're all talking no charges, you're just like the man.
I'm sad, yes, that's Jesus. You'll fit that you're on, Angelina. A real cockney teaser.
Here's the difference. The musical, whilst perhaps being more fun, tends to rely on big production songs involving dancers and other peripheral characters. Opera is more flexible, more subtle, more able to portray complex emotions, ability to respond to the needs of the drama that Bernstein wanted to smuggle into West Side Story. In West Side Story, Leonard Bernstein took the outward form of the Broadway musical and gave it a new drive and ambition, but he did it under the surface. Even though West Side, like all successful musicals, is made up of a series of distinct musical numbers interspersed with spoken scenes, there is a fluidity, a sense of progression through those numbers, which belongs much more to opera than to most musicals. Making songs cohere and relate to each other over a 2 or 3 hour period without them all sounding the same is much harder to achieve than it may seem, and on the whole, most Broadway songwriters didn't even attempt to do it. Here's just one example of a technique that Bernstein borrowed from opera. There's a little musical figure, a hook if you like, that first pops up in the opening orchestral prelude, just 10 seconds into the piece. This interval has lots of posh names in classical music: the tritone, the augmented fourth, the diminished fifth, or even the devil in music, as it was known in the Middle Ages. On its own, it's not exactly beautiful. It has a feeling of incompleteness because it makes one yearn to reach up to the so-called perfect fifth. The way this interval yearns to reach upwards, its incompleteness, even desperation, is precisely what Bernstein wants us to feel about his doomed young protagonists, Tony and Maria. So he plants it as a feature throughout the 2.5 hours of West Side Story. Here it is at the entrance of the Jets. And again, when the Sharks confront the Jets. The first solo of the piece is Tony's Something's Coming. This tune, too, is based on the tritone. Who knows, there's something due any day. So is his song Maria. Maria, I've just met a girl named Maria. And we're only halfway through Act 1. As a member of the audience, you're hardly aware of the existence of a musical code like this. But subliminally, such a technique helps bind the whole thing together. It's what makes it a good dramatic musical, and not just a compilation of nice songs. Tricks like these are always being used in opera. Bernstein put them to work in his jazzy and populist musical. Another trick borrowed from opera is the simultaneous overlaying of several different vocal lines. There's a good example at the end of Act 1. Here's another of Tony's big tunes.
Tonight, tonight, won't be just any night. Tonight there will be no morning star. Tonight, tonight, I'll see my love tonight, and for us, stars will stop where they are. Today, the minutes seem like hours, the hours go so slowly, and still the sky is light. Oh, moon, grow bright, and make this endless day, endless night.
Meanwhile, the Jets and the Sharks, on their way to a fight with each other, have their own ballsy chorus.
We're gonna rock it tonight, we're gonna jazz it up and have us a ball. They're gonna get it tonight, the more they turn it on, the harder they fall. Well, they began it, and we're the ones to stop them once and for all. Tonight.
Bernardo, the leader of the Sharks gang, has a girlfriend called Anita, and she has her own distinct music in this same highly strung scene.
Anita's gonna get a kick tonight. We'll have a private little mix tonight. He'll come in hot and tired, so what? Don't matter if he's tired, as long as he's hot tonight.
As we build and build to the climax of the scene, the rumble, Bernstein starts layering these tunes one on top of the other. With its sense of impending violence and its electric, youthful energy, this scene in West Side Story was, I believe, the precise moment, mid-20th century, when popular and serious art collided gloriously in music.
So I can count you, boy. Right. We're gonna have some ball.
Alright. Wound to tune, sperm to worm.
I'll see you there about 8
Tonight.
We're gonna rock it tonight. We're gonna jazz it tonight. We're gonna get it
The powerful layering of these themes, by no means easy to achieve musically, allows a whole complex of different and contradictory emotions to be expressed in one short piece of music. These people aren't agreeing with each other like in an old-fashioned Broadway musical. They're at war, or in love, happy, angry, sad, suspicious, or impatient, or filled with foreboding, all at the same time. The complexity of West Side Story has few, if any, precedents in the Broadway musical. So where might Bernstein have found a model of how successfully to blend his various elements into a dramatic whole? We'd be looking for a populist music drama, not a comedy, with earthy, potentially dangerous characters for whom honour and death are inextricably linked. There would be a doomed love affair and the death of at least one of the lovers at the end. Musically, there would have to be total integration between the material written for the soloists, the principal characters, and for the chorus. This criterion alone would rule out most operas, virtually all operettas, and certainly all musicals written before the Second World War. There would be powerfully evocative dance rhythms, preferably Hispanic or Latin American in character, some provocatively sexy dance to go with it, and a beefed-up orchestra with exotic percussion. Oh, and it would have to be a piece that Bernstein had known intimately since he was a child and had had a significant influence on him as a young man. The funny thing is, such a piece exists. It's Bizet's Carmen.
L'amour est un oiseau rebelle que nul ne peut apprivoiser. Et c'est bien en vain qu'on l'appelle, si lui convient d'y refuser. Rien n'y fait mana sous prière, l'un valait bien, l'autre c'était. Et c'est l'autre que je préfère, il n'a rien dit, mais il me plaît.
No one seems to have noticed or pointed this out before, but it's inconceivable to me that Bernstein didn't even subconsciously have Bizet's monster hit in mind when writing West Side Story. There are just too many happy coincidences. Carmen's Spanish dances, seguidillas and habaneras, become West Side's Latin dances, mambos and cha-chas. West Side's macho street gangs are the equivalent of Carmen's soldiers, smugglers, gypsies and bullfighters. Now, Bernstein didn't copy Carmen. The two works are quite different, but Carmen, Bernstein's favourite opera as a boy, provided a ready-made example of fusion. West Side Story also mixes classical and Latin styles.
I like to be in America, okay by me in America. Everything's free in America, for a small fee in America. I like the city of San Juan.
I know a boat you can get on.
Hundreds of flowers in full bloom.
Hundreds of people in each room.
Automobile in America, Romeo steel in America, Maya smoke wheel in America, very big deal in America.
This riotously energetic toe-tapping huapango, as the rhythm is known, seems effortlessly joyous, but it's not simple. Bernstein is having enormous fun with the ambiguities of the accents that drive the rhythm along. It's as if Albert Einstein is throwing a party and he's organising the after-dinner games. Take this first catchy phrase. What's happening here is called a hemiola, and this is how it works. You take 6 fairly quick beats in a row called quavers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can divide those up into 2 groups of 3, 1, 2, or you can divide them up into 3 groups of 2, 1, 2, 3. As you can see, in each case, the accent or emphasis falls in a different place. Alternating between the two means that the basic pulse can stay the same, but the net result is that there's a kind of motor force, like an alternating current in the rhythm.
I'll drive a Buick through San Juan.
If there's a road you can drive on,
I'll give my cousins a free ride.
how you get all of them inside.
Immigrant flows to America, many hellos in America. Nobody knows in America, Puerto Rico's in America.
The hemiola, with its South American swagger, is wholly appropriate to the Puerto Rican immigrants in the story who sing it. There's absolutely nothing vaudeville or gratuitous about this showstopper. It belongs 100% to its characters and to its function in the drama. Which is more than can be said for most of the musicals that preceded it. Before the Second World War, the musical was little more than a collection of songs and dances loosely linked together by the flimsiest of plots. The drama, such as it was, simply stopped when the song and dance numbers began. The musical that historians cite as the Great Leap Forward was Rodgers and Hammerstein's 1943 blockbuster, Oklahoma. This musical, it's said, was the first to integrate dance, drama, character, music and lyrics into the plot. In other words, the first modern musical. I disagree. The dancing in Oklahoma is neatly woven into the fabric of the story, with its farmyard hoedowns and so on, but they're still dances for dance sake. This was translated into the sumptuous Technicolor movie version of 1955. At no point does the choreography convey real dramatic action or emotional development, as it so often does in West Side Story. As for character, the claim is that Oklahoma's cowboys and country lasses are plausible working folk, not the glamorous types you normally see in musicals. But its idealized, smiley white yokels are stereotypes, as corny and escapist as any Fred Astaire toff. Oklahoma is sentimental and patronizing to its protagonists, the climax of its plot being the ridiculous auction of a bright young woman to a bunch of dim and arrogant blokes. Dramatically speaking, it's on a different planet from West Side Story. Oh, and this goes for the music too, which was old-fashioned even in 1943. Consider what was going on in jazz, with bebop being born at the same time. Oklahoma is a nostalgia trip. It may be charming, but it had nothing to do with contemporary America, except perhaps a desire to escape it. In this, it was absolutely typical of the Broadway and Hollywood musical. All the big hitting Broadway musicals that followed in the wake of Oklahoma, shows like The King and I, My Fair Lady and South Pacific, similarly treated such issues as class, poverty and race as an excuse for some wafer-thin romantic hokum. This is what makes West Side Story so utterly different from its immediate predecessors. In subject, setting and musical style, it was above all a contemporary American work. Its characters were plausible, realistic, tough young New Yorkers. Its music fashionable, hip and cool. This wasn't just rare for the musical, it was unheard of. By the 1960s, Leonard Bernstein was well established as one of the world's leading conductors. He was also a respected composer of classical works. But contemporary classical music had become sidetracked by avant-garde experiments that the mainstream audience couldn't follow. Bernstein himself said that serious music composed in this country today doesn't interest anybody, not even musicians. But Bernstein couldn't quite bring himself to accept the fact that the classical tradition he so loved was dead. His third and last symphony reflected, I think, his deep ambivalence about contemporary Western music's direction.
Oh, my Father, ancient, hallowed, lonely, disappointed Father, betrayed and rejected ruler of the universe, angry, wrinkled old majesty, I want to pray.
Written in 1964, the Third Symphony was entitled Kaddish.
I want to say Kaddish.
Kaddish is the Jewish prayer for the dead.
My own Kaddish.
I believe his frustration with classical music's headlong flight into ugliness and cynicism is one reason why there's so much anger and rage in this piece. There's a personal battle in the music of Leonard Bernstein reflected in this ferocious work. On one level, this battle is religious and existential. The symphony's protagonist, the speaker, seems to be angry with God. It's explosive stuff and provoked controversy, excitement and outrage in more or less equal measure.
Your covenant, your bargain with man, tin! God, your bargain is tin! It crumples in my hand, and where is faith now? Yours or mine?
There are many battles in this piece, not least a musical one that lies at the heart of it. On the one side, there's uncompromising avant-garde modernism. the other side, a more joyful and affirmative sound, music in the traditional Western style. It's perhaps a metaphor for the dilemmas in Bernstein's own career, torn as he was between the two. In the symphony's final minute, the traditional Western musical values seem to win out. The whole chorus sing a loud, defiant, rising major scale, as if to say faith and hope belong to the old musical truths after all. Bernstein didn't write another symphony after Kaddish, but perhaps he'd seen the writing on the wall for that form anyway. The symphony as a distinct genre after a glorious 200 years as the spearhead of instrumental music pretty much died out in the second half of the 20th century. It's ironic then that one of its pallbearers should be a man who gave so much of his life to interpreting the symphonic masterpieces of others as a conductor. Perhaps this explains why Kaddish sounds not so much like a laying to rest as a raging against the dying of the light. By the time Kaddish was first performed, tensions in American society were coming to the surface. The war in Vietnam and bitter divisions surrounding the civil rights movement were tearing the nation apart. Bernstein himself wanted to comment musically on what was going on, but in what form? In the 1960s, it was popular music, rock, soul and R&B, rather than classical, that seemed to be most effectively addressing the sexual, social and political issues of the times.
Life is too short to have sorrow. You may be here today and gone tomorrow. You might as well get what you want, so go on and live.
What's extraordinary, though, is that having decided to try his hand at incorporating the new style, he didn't write a pop anthem, a theatre piece, or even a rock opera, then fashionable, but a mass. The Mass was commissioned by Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis to honour her late husband and was first performed to open Washington, D.C.'s Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts in September '71. Interestingly, Bernstein's Mass was the close relation of a piece that opened on Broadway just 4 weeks after his premiere, Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice's Jesus Christ Superstar.
Christ, you know I love you. Did you see our way? I believe in you and God, so tell me that I'm saved.
Jesus Christ Superstar was made into a movie filmed in the Holy Land, and we can see how exciting its mixture of Broadway pizzazz, rock, soul and religion must have been when it first hit the stage. Both pieces approach Christianity from an ecumenical, almost secular viewpoint. Both embrace the rock, pop and theatre styles in fashion at the end of the 60s. Both mix electrified rock instruments with classical orchestra. And yet Superstar was a huge and enduring hit all over the world, whereas Bernstein's Mass had a lukewarm reception and has rarely been revived. Why is this?
I will sing the Lord a new song to praise him.
Bernstein's agenda for a piece commissioned to open an important national arts centre named for John F. Kennedy was inclusiveness. He wanted to embrace all America's communities, all its nations within nations, creeds within creeds, and felt that by bringing together such a colourful patchwork of musical influences in one piece, the music would itself be a metaphor for this vision.
Blessed is the man who loves the Lord. Blessed is the man who praises him. Louder, 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 and walks in his way.
But simply willing different styles together in a piece of music doesn't give it artistic unity. The music of Jesus Christ Superstar feels like it's the work of one composer. Bernstein's Mass feels like it was put together by a committee. It sounds to me like it was stapled together in a frantic rush, not conceived as a whole. But although the Mass wasn't a complete artistic success, it's an important groundbreaking work. In it, Bernstein pointed the way ahead to the music of today. If I had to make an educated guess as to the next huge stylistic collision, one that'll propel music forward through the 21st century, I'd say it was happening right now, right here in Britain. Amongst communities whose family origins are in India, Pakistan and Bangladesh, a new, vibrant, hybrid popular music has developed in Britain. Fusing Asian vocal styles and instrumental sounds with Western pop beats, it was first called Bhangra, and since its emergence in the 1980s, it's cross-fertilized further with hip-hop and other black dance idioms. Its popularity and geographical spread continue to grow, and so yet more tributaries and sub-styles appear every month. But what is yet to spill out into the mainstream is an amalgam of Asian and European classical styles, work in which the more sophisticated Asian and Western techniques seamlessly combine to create a new, third style that is neither one nor the other, but transcends them both. A work, in other words, as successful in doing this as was Bernstein's merging of Latin American and European classical music in West Side Story. Bernstein's vision was of a musical world without frontiers or hierarchies. A vision where music's job is to be interpreter and peacemaker, to be the point where cultures and communities meet, perhaps even in the 21st century to take the place of religion itself. Now there's a big idea.